Hello and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Relationships have the power to wound us and the power to heal us. As a clinical psychologist, author, and professor at Northwestern University, I've devoted my life to studying intimate partnerships and family dynamics. On Reimagining Love, I'm here to translate complex clinical topics into tools and takeaways that you can use in your relationships today. If you're ready to develop relational self-awareness and create vibrant and loving relationships with the people who matter most to you, you've come to the right place. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome back to Reimagining Love. Today is another episode for the daters out there, and I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest, Damona Hoffman. Online dating coach Damona Hoffman has been showing singles how to harness the power of technology to find love for over a decade. In this arena, Damona speaks from experience, having met her husband online years ago in the pre-app era of online dating. And now Damona is a regular contributor to The Drew Barrymore Show, NPR, and The Washington Post. You may also know her from season 11 of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Damona has created content and collaborated with most of the major dating apps, including Bumble and Match, and she was named the official U.S. dating coach of OkCupid in 2021. Her podcast, Dates and Mates, was named Best Podcast of the Year by the Black Podcasting Awards. Today, Damona is here to discuss the 4 dating myths that she confronts in her new book, F the Fairy Tale, Rewrite the Dating Myths and Live Your Own Love Story. These are myths that we've inherited from our culture and sneakily bring with us to our first dates and beyond. Instead of following these old rules, Damona offers us 4 pillars to focus on instead, pillars that are rooted in values and in authenticity. In our conversation, Damona also gives us insight into the current state of dating app burnout. Instead of ditching the apps altogether, she's going to offer a few tips and tricks to help us use the apps as a tool to get offline. Finally, we dole out some practical advice to a single mama who is struggling to figure out the logistics of dating with 2 teenagers. I really admire Damona's approach to dating because instead of supplying a how-to manual or pretending like there are strict rules for dating, Damona is all about giving you tools that you can use to show up for your dates with more power and more authenticity. This conversation was so much fun for me, and I hope that it's just as fun for you to listen to. Enjoy. Hi, Damona. It's so good to have you here on Reimagining Love.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I get to talk to you about one of my favorite topics. I love talking about dating. I am somebody with very little dating experience, but a ton of passion and devotion to supporting the daters of the world. I love studying, for as much as I'm a couples therapist, I also really love working at those beginnings and endings. And I think there's so much richness in the topic of dating. So I am excited to pick your brain on it. But I want to start with our relational self-awareness question that I ask all of our guests. Are you ready for it?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
Damona, how are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
Well, I have been with my husband for 20 years, and it's been interesting writing the book and talking about my book because I realized as I was embarking on this journey that it really, as much as it is designed to help people navigate their own dating journey, it really is in some ways a love letter to my husband and to all of the things that I have learned over the last 20 years in being in partnership with him. And it really has reinvigorated our relationship and given me the space to reimagine what does the next chapter look like? What do the next 20 years look like?
That's so special. There's something, I mean, I resonate around this idea of writing a book being a powerfully integrative experience versus when you're on Drew Barrymore and when you're creating your podcast, you are kind of out, and writing a book is so inward. It's so reflective. And so I hear that for you, as you were kind of pulling together and organizing all of your wisdom, your own love story was right there with you along the way.
Yeah, and I talk a little bit about how I began as a love cynic. I really didn't think it was going to happen for me, and really reflecting on how I changed before meeting him and then how much I've evolved since beginning this relationship. It was really just a reminder that we can change. We can change our minds. We can change our experiences. And everybody can have love and really should have love in whatever form makes the most sense for them. I really didn't think that he existed. And I told him for the longest time when we first met that I must have made him up. And finally he was like, I'm right here. I think you have to stop.
You can feel my flesh.
You have to stop denying my existence. But that is an experience that I hear from a lot of clients and a lot of Dates and Mates listeners, is that they really don't believe that it's possible for them. And when you don't believe it, you can't experience it. It blocks you from being able to really see that person that may be right in front of you, or open up in a way to allow that person in.
What's your sense? When I think about that kind of love cynicism that you are naming for yourself, which is something that you experience with a lot of your clients, there's different origin stories, right? Like different kind of flavors and textures and tones of like what kind of fuels that cynicism. What was it for you that was kind of fueling or creating your cynicism about, I don't think this is possible for me?
I always felt like a fish out of water. And to be honest, I kind of always was. I grew up in East Lansing, Michigan, and I am of a very, very diverse background. My mother is Black and Christian, and she grew up in the projects in Detroit. My dad is Jewish, and he grew up in suburbs of Chicago in an area that's very Jewish now, but an area that was not at the time. They got together. So it's like these two people who were both in different worlds came together and created me. And I just never felt like I fit in. I never saw people who looked like me on television. The standard of beauty in magazines was very different. And I really struggled just to feel comfortable in my own skin, let alone to feel beautiful, to feel desired, to feel dateable. That was a real journey for me. And I realized that once I became comfortable with who I am, and once I really leaned into that in dating as well, instead of trying to fit into some other person's mold of what is dateable and what is beautiful, when I was just me, that's actually when I was meeting more people. I was meeting people who were more compatible with me. And then I ended up meeting my husband in that time too.
Aww. What were are there particular turning points along the way that took you more deeply into your Damona-ness that helped you really kind of feel more present and alive in your skin and your journey and in your identity? Like, are there particular moments or supports along the way that you felt like were key for you?
Yes, I really needed to have the supports are key. I needed support from, first of all, just my community. I ended up moving to California, and I saw that there were people that looked like me here.
Mm-hmm.
Still not a lot of Black Jews, but
Mm-hmm.
there were some people. And that first step, just seeing that I was not a fish out of water any longer, and I had built a community around me of people who shared some of my experiences. And then I also started working with a coach. Not specifically a dating coach, but I was working with a life coach, like way before it was cool, Alexandra. Like now it seems like you throw a rock on Instagram, you're going to hit a coach.
Right.
But,
That's right.
but this was a time when it was kind of different. And she had me doing some inner child work. She had me take out a picture of myself as a child. And I had a really bad habit of always I was so desperate to connect that whenever anyone would say, let's get together, I would drop everything I had going on and I would be like, okay, yes. I always wanted to fill my schedule with people and say yes anytime I had any opportunity.
Hmm.
And in that, it sounds like, well, great. You had a full schedule, you had a lot going on, but there I hadn't carved out the time for me to figure out what made me happy. And I see this a lot of times in dating too, where we kind of go from one relationship to the next and we don't really figure out what do I want? And we start to take on the needs and the desires and the expectations of the other person. And I had to shed all of that and just look at that little girl. And she said, I want you to carve out time that's just for you to do something that enriches your soul, whether that's being outside, whether that's going to a museum, doing some writing, something that enriches your soul. And if you don't have time or someone else calls and you want to book through that time, I want you to look at that little girl and I want you to tell her you don't have time for her.
Ouch. Okay. Okay.
A
Okay.
whole light bulb went off in my head. And I realized that I really hadn't been making her special. I hadn't been seeing her. I hadn't been appreciating her. And that really was the beginning of a long journey of really stepping into myself and becoming whole before I even thought about attracting another person into my life.
There's so much richness in everything that you just shared with us, and thank you for giving us that window into your story. And what I love is like this sort of both and the dialectic of community and self. Like you like the first thing you spoke to was the need for community. You needed to have what our mutual friend Kim Holstein calls witnessing eyes. You really needed to see yourself in the faces of others. You needed to be embedded in community. Okay, that's a key element. But you also needed your own deep connection to yourself and your journey. That those go hand in hand. And I think there's something so beautiful about that, because it's not like you're not giving, our listeners who are daters, you're not giving them the kind of like A, B, C. It's all this and none of this. Like you're saying there's a need for both of it. And the thing that it sounds like you really learned was like the discernment of when your yes is really a yes and when your no is really a no, and that it really is like sourced from something inside of you.
Completely. And that's kind of my style when I'm coaching as well. I'm never a ABC, this is how you do it. I'm all about designing your own dating destiny, because I think we do have to be active participants in doing those things that you just mentioned, in building the community, in developing the sense of self, and then also really clearly identifying where we want to go in relationships. And I think one of the reasons that there's so much dating frustration right now is that we're all caught up in the momentum. And we can unpack. There are a lot of reasons there's so much dating frustration and disappointment and burnout right now. But I think that is at the core, is that many daters haven't really stopped to say, what does this really look like
For me.
for me?
Uh-huh.
For me, exactly. Not what have I been told I'm supposed to have, or what did it look like before, or just chasing the likes, the way that we are trained to do on social media. Dating is not about chasing likes. It's about finding that alignment.
Well, it's what I really respect about your brand new book, F the Fairy Tale, Rewrite the Dating Myths and Live Your Own Love Story. As you say at the top, this is not a how-to book. This is a why?
A why how book.
A why
Yeah.
how book, a why how book.
Yeah.
And that is when I'm looking at kind of the matrix of support that's out there for people who are dating, I'm really discerning. And your work speaks to me, because it's not the A plus B plus C. It really is. It's rooted in helping people understand themselves more deeply, so that then the choices flow from there. So I think that is the key to it, because it's to follow somebody else's how-to manual is, again, to give away your power, to bypass your own inner knowing and inner trust and to ignore your inner child. And so I think that you have positioned your reader, us, in this book and right in just the same place that I want to position daters, is in their own search for their own journey that's going to suit and serve them.
Yeah. And I think our work really dovetails beautifully because a lot of this foundational work that you have the opportunity to do in dating is going to pay off as you move into relationships. And so many times when people have challenges in relationships, I found that it's because some of these questions were not answered at the beginning. And maybe you got caught up in momentum. Maybe it was just the natural progression at that point. But we always have the opportunity to go back. It's just a lot easier if you do it at the beginning.
So you met Mr. Hoffman on a dating app in 2000.
Correction, dating site. Yeah, no.
Dating site. That's right. Well, it
Early
wouldn't have been an app. It certainly wouldn't have. There wouldn't have been a phone. It was a
Right.
dating website.
Site.
You had to dial up, probably.
Yeah, I have to be honest about that. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. Yes. And so it was, right. There weren't even apps yet, dating websites. There still was probably more stigma. Do you remember, was there more, it's certainly more stigma then than there is now.
Completely. We didn't tell people that's how we met for the longest time. Our wedding was sort of our coming out party. And it's funny to me now that so many weddings people tell their online dating story, but it was so raw. It was anxiety producing to share that. And I even remember I just saw one of my earliest clients a few weeks ago, and same thing for her. She was a flight attendant. She met her person on Match.com, and they told everyone that they met in the airport. So then as the relationship progressed, they were like, we're going to have to tell people this is how we met because we don't want our family to be like, wait a minute, you didn't meet in the airport. So eventually when they got married, they came out to their family as online daters too.
That was one of the challenges of online dating back in the day, was the challenge of the shame and stigma. But what are some of the challenges that you feel like you are hearing most from your clients these days around dating apps? What are the big sources of frustration and cynicism and anxiety?
Well, because I am a why how person, I'll give you the sources of frustration, but I also feel like it's important to acknowledge where they come from.
Absolutely.
The frustrations mostly come from ghosting and people not being treated with respect or feeling that they are not being respected in the dating experience. And then there's also so many messages, connections, matches that don't actually even end up becoming anything. They don't become dates, they don't become matches, they don't even become pen pals. And then they start to feel like a waste of time. Those are the two biggest frustrations, but I think it's important to acknowledge our participation in both of those things. The biggest thing that has shifted since I began doing this work, and I started writing dating profiles like 17, 18 years ago, the speed of communication has changed dramatically. Therefore, the speed of dating has also changed dramatically. And the volume of options that we have has also changed. So it used to be my clients, if they were going, they might come to me having gone on maybe 2 dates the prior year. And if I could get them up to maybe 1 date a month, they were pretty thrilled with that. And then as the speed of dating increased, because now our dating pool has expanded from people in our local community. It used to be you could only meet someone through church, through school, through work, through friends. Now our pool has expanded to anyone, anywhere in the world. We have many more options. So then we're engaging in conversations, constant conversations with many, many different people that then don't always end up manifesting into a date or a connection. our brains aren't wired. I really want to hear your thoughts on this, but our brains aren't wired for that kind of connection.
No.
So we're having
Mm-mm.
10 concurrent conversations with people all over the world. And then when we move into connection with somebody, sometimes we haven't become a real person to them yet because we're just a name in the phone. So it was easier for us to have more connections, more connections, more conversations, which we thought was better. We thought more was more, but really more meant that you were not solidified as a real person. You weren't building that accountability. And we no longer had those community connections that made someone required to actually treat us like a human. And we got to the point of burnout. So now today, most of my clients, if they're not going on 2 dates in a week, they feel like they have failed. And yet it's not realistic and it's not sustainable. So what I'm trying to do is to shift us back to quality over quantity, and to also give daters their power back in this dynamic, because a lot of people, I think, are just so burnt out and so frustrated and get caught up in the momentum of the communication, the text communication, that they think that this is just a part of dating. We've just come to just accept that that's just one thing that happens. And it doesn't have to happen that way, but it does require us to show up in a different way when we are in conversation with people and when we are setting our expectations and other people's expectations for how we are going to be treated.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Right. People who are dating really need to use the dating app as a tool. It's a vehicle. It's not. Okay. So then give us the how. So given the ghosting and the speed of connection, those are tied together for sure. You really want daters to be savvy about how they engage with the dating app. So what are some of your best practices that you like for the daters of the world?
The daters of the world have to get offline more
ASAP.
quickly.
Okay.
ASAP. I say
Yep.
within the first week. And I don't have a lot of rules, Alexandra. Like, I don't like saying, there are people that are like, don't have sex until this date. Don't go. I give guidelines. They're a little bit fluid, but they're guidelines because I saw that if people went more than a week of texting back and forth, they started to develop an idea of this person that may not exist in the real world. And you need to become real to get that person really to show up for you and to see if this is a real connection. So somewhere between not that exact night and not more than 1 week that you actually make a plan, that you set a date. Because I do find that if you make a plan that night, oh, hey, we're both online. What are you doing in an hour? Let's meet for a drink. Those connections did not usually end up moving into long-term relationships. And then if they went longer than a week, usually it would fizzle out or just become a time suck that then didn't end up turning into a real relationship. If someone was long distance, that's different. But yes, you need to drive towards the date. And I say also look for reasons to say yes over reasons to say no. I feel like we're so obsessed with red flags now. And
Mhm.
I'm all about the green flags because we can always find a reason to say no, right?
Well, yeah, especially because our brains are wired for that, right? There's so much of our brain is wired for safety, danger. And obviously we need to keep ourselves safe, but it means that anything that has a little even whisper of uh-oh is going to become amplified, right? Those are going to just stand out more to that part of our brain that is kind of skews negative in the service of safety. So you really want people looking for reasons to say yes.
Yeah. And I also think another part of that is that we've almost come to hate dating apps. There's so much rhetoric. I was just reading a New York Times article the other day about, why everyone's leaving dating apps, why dating apps are so terrible. And first of all, people are saying they're leaving dating apps, but they're not leaving dating apps. They're still there. They're just sort of zombie dating. on the dating apps,
Mm-hmm.
but expecting it to be a fulfilling experience and then carrying frustration around it. And when we date from that place, we are looking for confirmation that our hypothesis is correct, that dating apps suck. So we are saying we want it to be different, but then we're showing up with that filter of assumption that it's not going to be different and looking for the red flags.
There's something also about in the process of curating oneself for one's profile. Like, I think that can also like create the conditions of a lot of like perfectionism and what's the image I'm trying to put out there. And so what are some things that you want a dater to keep in mind as they're prepping their profile and perhaps like feeling self-worth stuff coming up, appearance stuff coming up, like, am I enough stuff coming up? Like, what are some of the ways to self-compassionately, but also in an empowered way, create a profile that you're going to feel good about, aligned with, and it's going to work for you?
Well, much like my own journey, the more you lean into your authenticity, the better your experience will be. And I find there's more frustration among people that are trying to put out a certain image of this is what I think is attractive than people that sort of let it all hang out. And there's even some data that supports this. When you are somewhere in the middle of like you're playing it safe. You're not being specific about the things you like. And I've read thousands of profiles over the years. The number of times I have seen, I'm just as comfortable in a pair of sweats as I am in a pair of heels. I'm looking for my partner in crime. All of these sort of cliches, these profiles that really are saying the same thing and are actually saying nothing. They are playing it safe because we think we don't want to turn somebody off. We don't want to say the wrong thing. If we're specific, if we say we like this comedian and that person doesn't like that comedian, or if we say that we lean politically this way and that person leans politically the other way, then they might say no to us. And I say, actually, that's good. We want to turn off the people that are not the right match for us, or that will be turned off because we like different comedians, because those who are aligned with you are more likely to see you as a match and to take action. And I'm all about, let's get to the part of action. It's not, again, about just getting as many likes as possible. It's how many of those likes are going to turn into something. So the data that I've looked at say that when you walk the middle of the road, you actually get less engagement than if you are on either side of the spectrum. The people that some folks are really into and some folks say they would never date, those people actually have better results than the people in the middle of the road. OkCupid used to have people rank profiles, and it was the people that had some ones and some fives that did much better than the people that were threes down the middle. So don't be afraid to be yourself and to be a little polarizing, but definitely use that precious real estate of the profile to be specific.
Okay. And being authentic doesn't mean being vulnerable. You're not saying to kind of let it all hang out, but to not be afraid to, as you're saying, lean into things that are specific about you. And that's the empowering piece, right? Like that you want to pull towards you the people who you're going to want to be spending time with. And so it's less about being middle of the road and bringing everybody to you, because you don't want everybody. You only need one.
Exactly. And you want somebody that gets you. And if they're turned off by things that are, part of your daily life or intrinsically you, then that's not the person that you're going to end up having a relationship with, or they're going to end up in your office later.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's right. You're going to spare each other a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
Okay, so you give us 4 dating myths and you kind of help us break them down and then replace the myth with something that is more grounded. I mean, I love you ground, as you dispel these myths, you ground them in something that is both scientific and spiritual. You're sort of pulling from a number of sources, which I love. That's very much how I roll as well. So I want to just go through and just say a little bit about each of these myths, because I love them all so much. And this lists list myth, please, please, please start there, because I always say, like, if you want me to like climb the wall, say something about how somebody checks all your boxes. Like that is a phrase I really struggle with. So talk to us about what the list myth is and how it tends to show up in daters' psyches.
Yeah. So when I began writing this book, I wanted to have a lot of myths. I started out with about 15 myths. Like, these are all of the things that people write into Dates and Mates about, or, ask me about in coaching sessions. And then my editor very smartly was like, maybe we should pare this down. What are the biggest myths? And I said, well, let me think. I really think of the dating process as like a cycle. So I said, well, let me begin at the beginning. How would I begin with a client? And always I start with, what are you looking for? Who are you and what do you want? And people will start to give me their list. And so many times the list, either it feels like it was borrowed from someone else. It has the same thing. I'm like, I've literally, in all those thousands of profiles I said that I've read, I've literally seen the same list so many times, like the same height and income level and level of education. And there are certain things that we have been told are universally attractive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's not what you need. I'll give you a specific example. I'm really big on having an equity partnership. To me, I knew I'm not going to step back from my career to be a parent. I know I want to be a parent, but I need to have a partner that's going to not have an ego about being the person that's picking up the kids, that's making the lunches, because the life that I'm trying to build, that's the kind of partnership that I want. To me, chivalry don't mean a thing. Like,
You're not right. Any points.
If you open the door for me, that's nice and cute. But like, can you pick up my kid from school when they have a headache, like happened last week? And my husband is that guy. For a lot of people, he's not going to clear the bar for what they are told they're supposed to have, because he will not open a door. You're going to be standing out there in the cold,
clearing your throat.
You're going to be waiting for that door to open, and he's going to be sitting in the car with it running, wondering why you're not getting in. And ultimately, that was the right match for me, because he valued the things that I value. And so I really had to look at what was on my list and what is the life that I'm building? What are my relationship goals? So I just sort of painted a picture of what that looked like for me 20 years ago when we started dating, what I visualized. I am living that life today. We have 2 kids. We have very much an equity partnership. The door is still not being opened, and that's fine, because that's not what I valued. So when we get away from the list of everyone else's list, or not even having a criteria, some people think when I say the list myth, they think I mean just be open, just doesn't matter. No, I'm not saying don't have criteria. I'm just saying really look at what is on that list and choose what you put on your list mindfully. And if you are guided by what I call the 4 pillars of long-term compatibility, the pillar that aligns with that is goals. What are your relationship goals? And then put that on the list, not that he's over 6'2", because that's like less than 5% of the US population.
So the criteria and the vision, you want a dater to really tie that to the relationship goals and to designing the kind of love story and life story that you want to create for yourself. So make sure that there's a hook there beyond just, right, like you can't really, there's no hook for 6'2" beyond, right, we all have been socialized, straight women have been socialized, cis hetero, women have been socialized to value height and men, because we've all been socialized. We've all internalized those ideas and beauty standards. And so you're saying if somebody's got something that they want, really tie it to the life that you want, the love story you want, the kind of partnership you want that's going to serve you and it's going to bring out like a lot of loveliness in you.
Completely. And I just had an aha moment as you were talking. We also need to release our attachment to other people's lists. Because I think a lot of
Oof.
times, right, we have this idea, this is not in the book, y'all. This is hot off the presses.
Hot take.
Well, but you really gave me this epiphany. We are attached to these ideas that, well, we're not dateable because we don't have our, whatever, 36, 24, 36 or whatever. Who does, by the way? Like,
Yeah.
not even Barbie. But we think, well, we're not dateable because of these things that we have, these things that are a part of our story, or this is how we look, or this is what happened to us. And I see a lot of daters that end up in my office that are holding themselves back because they think somebody else has a list. And society has told us, oh, I'm too old, I'm too short, I don't have enough money. I'm hearing this a lot with like debt and finances. I don't even know where this is coming from because so many people are experiencing probably what you're experiencing right now. And yet we think that that's something that makes us undateable because of what has been passed down to us.
In liberating us from the checking the boxes, you're also giving people an opportunity to liberate themselves from the stories of the boxes that they imagine they don't check for somebody else.
We have to do that. Otherwise, we will be in our heads and we will sabotage something great.
We'll look for the evidence that we're being rejected long before we have been.
Completely.
Speaking of debt, you give one of the letters. The book is really, I love how throughout the book you share letters that people, your community has written to you over the years. And there's one from a woman who has debt that she's bringing into a relationship, and she's got her own set of feelings around it. And she imagines, I think this is to your point, she imagines being rejected or being undateable because of this debt. And it's like she's writing somebody else's story long before they have. What are your thoughts around, like, where do you want somebody to put, for example, the story of their debt when they're beginning to date a new person?
I tell my clients that information needs to be earned. So authenticity doesn't mean trauma dumping. It doesn't mean giving someone every part of your story. It means showing up authentically as you. And as you build that trust and sense of safety that you were talking about earlier, as you build that, you share information on a need to know basis or on a I feel comfortable at this point sharing this information basis, but never as never as a reason. I think sometimes we'll hold these things back because we think that is the reason that somebody's going to break up with us, or we put it up front. I was just talking with a dater the other day who was saying they have a pretty traumatic thing that happened, domestic violence around their child, and they've become an advocate, and there's a lot of information on their social media about it. And they said, well, I'd rather just give someone my social media so that they can just learn that. Or, I'll link my social media in my dating profiles. I'll hear this a lot. I'll link my social media because then they'll just have all the information. But the thing that we forget is that when somebody is just looking at your social media, they are hearing the story without any context. And they're also hearing it at a point where they're not necessarily invested in your story or co-creating the rest of your story with you. So I do not recommend, it's sometimes an unpopular opinion, I do not recommend starting with social media because you sort of lose control of the narrative. And I think of your dating profile or, your first few dates is like, you're the curator of the museum of your life. You're not going to put all the Picassos out. You're just going to, you're going to tell a story, right? Of like, now we're looking at, and now we're going through the blue period. And now we're,
And then the story, and then to your point about context, then the story of coming through an experience of domestic violence, that story is contextualized in something bigger, or that story is built off of the other person's story. It becomes a connector. It becomes something that then is embedded in a larger narrative. I think it's also really important that when that story gets shared, it's shared as that I'm privileging you with a story, not I'm sharing this as an apology. This is not an apology to you. This is me letting you into a deeper room of my house, and that's a privilege.
Yeah.
It's not an apology. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. Okay. The rules myth. So tell us about that. You've already sort of said that you don't love the rules. I'm right here with you, but tell us about like when you kind of think about some of the rules that daters are told to follow or seem to want to follow, like what does that say to us about this cultural moment? And where do you want our daters to put themselves instead of being bound by a set of rules?
That's interesting that you position it around the cultural moment that we're in. Because I think we've been in this moment. We've been in the rules era.
The moment of patriarchy.
Oh, well, there is that. But, we've been in the rules era for a very long time, like maybe since the start of history. I actually think, patriarchy aside, I think we have more choice than we've had in the long tail of history. We have more choice now than we've had in a long time. And it just feels to me inauthentic to play by old rules, by somebody else's rules, when in most places, and I know I'm not speaking to everyone listening right now, there are places where we don't have certain freedoms, and I'm not going to get political. But if you have freedom and you have choice, you owe it to yourself to design your own rule book. Because when we're just following somebody else's rule book, whether that's actually the rules or whether that's the game, which was sort of the, hetero male version of the rules, or whether you're following how-to videos on TikTok or watching The Bachelor, all of these are, you play the game and you win. And I'm like, first of all, we just figured out, what are we even winning? Because a lot of my clients don't even want marriage. I think, as somebody that works in television, it really gets under my skin that like the goal now of every dating show is like,
The wedding.
and we get married.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, we're in a point of time where, first of all, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Like, the average age of marriage has gone up significantly in the last decade, the last couple of decades. But it's really interesting looking at the graph of age of first marriage and how it just shot up in the last few years as people have had, particularly women, have had more choice. I don't think that correlation is a mistake whatsoever. But you might not want marriage. That might not be your goal. A lot of my clients, either they've already been married or that's just not something that's a goal for them. And we're constantly fed this steady diet of the fairy tale. And if you play by the quote rules or the game or the hacks that you see online, then sure, you might get an outcome. You might get the promised outcome, but is that the outcome that you even want? And that's why I say tools over rules, because I'd rather give you the tools so that you can build the dating plan for yourself that is aligned with who you are and what you value, how you want to live your life. And that's why the values pillar is the one that I have offered as the antidote to living your life by the rules.
And values it's so much more relational because the rules, right? The thing that always strikes me about the rules is it feels like a set of mini traps, like little tests of the other person to either pass or fail when they often didn't even know they were being tested, when they might be more than happy to meet your expectation in this realm if they knew your expectation. And what you're posing instead of the values is so much more relational. Like, to what degree are you and I really suited to be kind of co-authors of the story of this connection?
I love the way that you position that. Yes, you're absolutely right. And this is why it is so individual that you're designing the dating plan for you. And we're talking about relationships, so it is relational. It should absolutely be relational because you might find somebody that matches the list, but if your values aren't aligned, if you're not traveling the same path, and if you don't look at the world in the same way and value the same things, that's not a recipe for strong, long-lasting partnership. But You're the expert in that.
I'm right there with you. Okay, so let's do our two more myths, and then we've got a really great question from Annie that I want to get us to. So when you talk about, so the chemistry myth has to do with chemistry, and I'm thinking about kind of like the two ends of the spectrum. It's like, you write about kind of the risks of searching for the fireworks and the big spark in the beginning, but then there's the other end of the spectrum of just like, I don't know, I don't think I'm feeling it. So where's the sweet spot around kind of the role of attraction, the place of attraction? Like how much is enough to get somebody kind of past that first, second, third date? What do you want our daters to be anchoring into or guided by around attraction?
If you could replace the idea of chemistry with curiosity,
Beautiful.
that is a better guide. So I tell my clients and listeners that if you get to the end of the first date, which by the way, hot tip, this is a hot tip. Everyone is overstaying their welcomes on first dates.
Okay. Get in, get out.
Get in, get out. Leave the energy on a high note about an hour, hour and a half tops. And then you leave them wanting more. And then you leave space also for discovery, for you to figure out how you're feeling between that moment and the next date if there is one. But if you're still curious at the end of the first date, go on the second date. If at the end of the second date, you're like, I'm still curious. I didn't learn all these things about this person. I still want to know more. There's this curiosity, this yearning, this inspiration to see what else this person is about. You go on the third date. If by the third date, you're not like, what would it be like to kiss this person? You're not having any of those sort of chemistry feelings, then usually that is not your person. Now, I did have someone just write into Dates and Mates recently that said they were listening to the show and they were like, okay, 3-date rule. I'm going to wait until the 3-date. And then they were like, I'm still curious at the end of the third date, but I'm not really sure. So they went on a 4th date and they didn't have clarity. So they went on a 5th date and they said by the 5th date, it sort of kicked in and now they're dating someone.
Okay.
So again, these rules are really just guidelines, but you've got to tune into that inner compass. And if you're like, I don't have clarity, because a lot of people end it when they're in that space of, I don't know. And if you're still in, I don't know, then it's probably worth another hour, 2 hours to see this person. So that is the guideline for chemistry versus curiosity. And the pillar that I line that with is communication. I know you're all about this. So we really need to be building that communication piece in those first few dates so that you're getting to unpack and understand if somebody's aligned on your goals and your values, because all of these pillars build upon the one that came before.
I really like the kind of softness of curiosity over chemistry. And I love the softness around like 3-ish, because that person the example you just gave, at that moment in their life, their desire may just have taken a bit longer to kick in for things that had to do with their own stress level, their own, what was happening in their family dynamic, whatever. And for the other person as well, like that other person's desire may just be taking a little longer to come forward because they're afraid of pushing you away, or they're afraid of coming on too strong, or they have their own kind of constraints. So just to follow the curiosity, and you're not saying indefinitely, but you're saying 3-ish.
Yeah.
And that's in kind of a soft edge there that people can play around with.
I know it's not, TikTok sticky to say 3-ish, but it's just the reality.
It's the reality because it's just messy. It's just messy and complicated. Okay, the soulmate myth. So what is it around the idea of soulmates that can end up holding somebody back from an opportunity that might really be nice for them or good for them?
First of all, the research I've looked at says that about 70% of people believe in soulmates, which really socked me in the gut. Because and I know we all have slightly different interpretations of soulmate, but what soulmate tends to mean to me and most of the people I talk to is that there's one person that you're looking for. There's one person out there that is going to complete you. And that your job is to find this needle in a haystack, which sounds pretty exhausting to me. I know we've been led to believe that it's supposed to feel romantic, but to me, that's as a dating coach, I'm like, how are we going to find this person? Like,
are they wearing a tracking device? Yeah.
Are they wearing an Apple tag? I don't know how to find this person. But it robs you of that opportunity to do all the things that we were talking about before and really see who you become when you are with another person who is aligned with you in those ways. And it robs us of the discovery too. And then when you are in relationship with someone, it makes you question, well, I really like this person. And I get questions like this all the time. I met someone, they're really great. They check all my boxes. Don't climb the wall. They check all my boxes. I feel great when I'm with them. They'll give me all of the green flags. And then they'll say, but I don't know if they're my soulmate. There's always this nagging feeling in the back of our mind, if we're looking for a soulmate, that there's something divine that's supposed to happen. And, I've been in a relationship a very long time. There was no one moment. Like, people ask, how did you know he was the one? Because after 3.5 years, when he got down on one knee, the answer was obviously yes, because I had chosen him as my soulmate every day leading up to that point. It's not something where soulmates are born. They're really made. They're made through learning relationally about one another, as you were saying earlier, and making that choice. And eventually you have to choose to take a leap of faith that if everything else has been aligned up to that point, and you also have like the communication we were just talking about, that you can navigate any challenges that come up in the future. But it's not going to be perfect. And that the angels are not going to come down and sing to you, I don't think. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that.
No, but I think there's something that is like both shattering and empowering about your vision of soulmate. I think the shattering part is that there is, right? How do we not want a wish for that, like, absolute clarity and knowing, because we're so afraid of being hurt, and so the wish, I think, is a defense against what is so very real, which is just not wanting to be hurt or have our hearts broken. But then what becomes so empowering is exactly what you said, is like, okay, so then make them. If you like them and you love them, and there's goals and there's communication and there's values and there's alignment, then you get to make them your soulmate. Like, what the hell's more empowering than that?
Oh, totally agreed. And that's really my whole goal with F the Fairy Tale, is to shine a light on those places that we haven't really examined, and those stories that we've come to believe are true about ourselves, about society, about love, and then to empower people to design their own roadmap.
Well, you've done it, Damona. You have done it. It's a rock solid book. Okay, let's help Annie before I let you go. Before I let you get back to Drew. Okay, so we have a listener. She is in Idaho, Annie, she, her pronouns, and she says, hi, single mom of 2 teenagers, ages 13 and 15. I have my kids full time. Apart from the normal fear and trepidation of getting back into dating, I have a very practical question. How? Like, how are people finding, 1, the time, and when they desire intimacy, 2, a place to be intimate that feels comfortable? Is it all hotels and me going to their place, or ... question mark, exclamation point, question mark?
I love that you read all the punctuation.
Yes,
important context.
Yeah. Okay, so Damona, what are you wanting to whisper into Annie's ear?
It's really important to create the container for the life that you are building. So you have one life as a mom, and I get it. I'm a mom of 2 kids as well. And even in a relationship, I sometimes have to create certain containers, boundaries for intimacy in my married life.
100%.
So it's not all that different, to be honest with you. But there's this saying I reference in the book, where attention goes, energy flows. So when you have been in mom mode, that's your identity right now, mom of 2. And that's where you put all of your attention and energy. and time. So many times I get questions that involve time, Alexandra, that precious resource that we are not getting any more of. And I say, how you choose to spend your time and who you choose to spend it with really matters. So if it is important to you to have intimacy, you have to make the time. It's not going to present itself. And especially when you have something as important as raising two teenagers, you have to be very deliberate about scheduling in that time. So when I'm working with single parents, I'll say, block it in your calendar. Give yourself a date day. And that's either you're working on date activities, you're going to go to a mixer, you're going to be on your dating app, or you're actually going to pursue filling that space with an actual date, which some weeks is going to work out depending on how the dating app gods shine on you that day. And sometimes it's not going to work out and sometimes it is. But you need to physically carve out that space. And I think it's important also to not put the cart before the horse, because sometimes people stop themselves from dating because they're planning 5 steps ahead. Like, you're already planning to have sex with somebody that you haven't yet met, and maybe you haven't even created a dating profile or started this journey. We'll figure that out when we get there. We don't know what their situation is. Maybe they have a place to be intimate that feels comfortable to you and it's literally a non-issue. Maybe they don't and it is hotels. You will figure that out when you get there. That's my take. What do you think?
I think that's great. I think everything you said makes so much sense. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that she wants to see, there's a Martin Luther King quote, I don't know exactly, like seeing the whole staircase before you take the first step. Like, you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. And so you're inviting her. It makes sense that she is fast forwarding because there are very real constraints and there are very real emotions attached to the idea of being sexual with a new partner and all of that. But you're just inviting her back to what's right here, right now. And it's actually not a her problem. It's going to become the two of them problem. It'll be for the two of them to figure out. And there's potentially something really kind of fun and cool and relational about the two of them figuring it out together. Like, there might be options that she actually literally can't see right now because she doesn't have the partner that she wants to be sexual with yet. And so really her job right now, and I think we would both give her huge kudos for, is just that first step, whatever it is, if it's making her profile, if it's, wherever she is in her journey. Like, that's so wonderful that she is kind of claiming, right, the place of love in her life, even as she's got 2 kids where she could pour all of her attention and energy into them. There's a part of her that's saying, actually, I think I want something that is mine. So I love just the practice of putting that time in her calendar. I think that's a really cool suggestion that she's holding that time. That's a practice of like claiming this for herself. And then it may not be, to go back to your point about designing a journey that is hers, it may not be that she's a Saturday night dinner and show kind of a dater. She might be Wednesday afternoon. And then that might, so that she gets to have her dating life reflect the realities of her life. And so she can be part of some really cool, really sexy dates that are daytime or that fit into her life in the places where she can make them fit. And also the other thing I was thinking about is, who's her village? Are there siblings of hers that can tag in? Like, who else can kind of be, I mean, her kids aren't little kids, but who can invite the kids over for a sleep under? Who can, how can she kind of tap into the power of her village when that time comes?
I love all of that. And I think it is important to just take a step, like you said, and just do one thing this week. Make a commitment. Tell somebody else too. You're more likely to keep the commitment if you tell that village, "Hey, I'm dating," and you get that reassurance too. And it kind of goes back to this idea of choice too, that we have choice now. That's one reason I really am bullish on dating apps, because when I began this work 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, a woman who was divorced with 2 kids did not have the options to date that she does now, because our communities were smaller. And through online dating, it has expanded our community. I have helped so many divorced women find that sense of sexiness and freedom and find partnerships again So I think it's wonderful that she's even asking the question, as you said, and we're both cheering you on.
Yeah. I was also thinking about how I don't want her to think she has to apologize for the realities of her life as she goes into this, right? That in the ways that whenever her partner, the person she's dating, accommodates her, again, it's a thank you, not an apology. Like, this is just her reality, and how cool that somebody else gets to accommodate her and make space for her in their life, you know? So I think that I would not want her to start off feeling like her approach and her parameters are in any way, shape, or form less than they would be if she was not a single mom with full-time caregiving responsibilities. There's no less than in that equation.
Completely. And we don't know their story either. Like, they may have a similar story. And we assume, well, this is a situation that makes it more complicated, and place that on the other person when really they may be coming at it not from that perspective or with a similar situation themselves.
Yeah. This has been so fun, Damona. Thank you so much for being here with me. We will, of course, put links to the book in the show notes. F the Fairy Tale, Rewrite the Dating Myths, and Live Your Own Love Story. But how else can people get to know you and your work?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I appreciated this conversation and even having a couple of epiphanies myself. Yes, you can find F the Fairy Tale wherever you get your books, or fthefairytalebook.com. Also, I do the Dates and Mates podcast every Tuesday for 11 years. So if you have further questions you want to ask, please submit them on Instagram or Facebook, X, I guess we're calling it now. TikTok. I'm at Damona Hoffman. And I love doing this work. I love doing this every week. And I have loved talking with you. So thank you for having me.
Same. Thanks, Damona. Thank you, Damona, for joining me here on the podcast. You can find links to Damona's new book, F the Fairy Tale, Rewrite the Dating Myths and Live Your Own Love Story, and to her podcast, Dates and Mates, in the show notes. And thank you to the brave listener who wrote in that so relatable question. I hope that we gave you some good ideas for your upcoming dating adventures. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, I invite you to share it with a friend who is perhaps feeling particularly burned out by the dating apps. And maybe it will inspire you to find some time to help each other get creative with your dating profiles. Let me know how it goes. And until next time, be well. Reimagining Love is produced and edited by Emily Reeves. Our theme music was composed by Slade Warnkin. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.